Today's topic, discrimination and homophobia.
Have you guys faced homophobia in your lives?
You know, the world was more dangerous back then.
We almost deal with more homophobia just because we're online than someone might have back in the day.
These two guys are walking towards us, and they made this comment to us saying, you two people like you don't belong in this area.
Is that why you felt like maybe you couldn't come out at work?
Oh, that was definitely one of the reasons. The corporate sector in North America, you feel completely isolated and alone.
In America, you barely touch a guy, you're gay, you call it faggot. Here, I find out the shit they're doing here. Why was it not I born in the UK? Hey guys, I'm Nick.
And I'm Ant.
And we're the new gays.
I'm Frank.
And I'm Dan.
And we're the old gays.
And this is Old Gays, New Gays.
This is the podcast where we compare all things gay through the lenses of two generations of LGBT couples.
And today's topic is discrimination and homophobia. Sorry, guys. So basically just chatting about our experiences as gay men in the world, and homophobic experiences that we've ever had, and yeah. That's it. Sorry.
So for the listeners out there, that took us about half an hour for Nick to get those words out, and this is take 10.
Right. Anywho, we get the point.
You'll see the bleeps at the end of the episode.
Homophobia and discrimination.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You should have just introed
I'll just have
it.
you intro it next time.
So,
right.
guys, have you experienced... So I know the generational differences between homophobia and discrimination are going to be wild, purely on the basis that it was not as accepting back then as it is in today's generation. But I would really like to start this episode off by hearing, have you guys faced homophobia in your lives? And if so, what was a moment in your relationship where you've experienced that?
What's interesting for me is that you do feel discrimination even in today's world, not just in the 80s, but it's still present. I don't feel it as much, but it is certainly still present, and we're going to talk through an example that actually didn't happen that long ago, that unfortunately and scaringly, it's still around.
Oh, yeah. And it's around in different ways now, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
So what was a certain moment where you've actually experienced it? Have you experienced it as a couple?
Well, I would say, let's take a step back so you know what it was like when we were younger, when we were your age, maybe, because... It was the world was more dangerous back then, and maybe it is still dangerous. But 3 hours from where I grew up, when I was almost an adult, Matthew Shepard was killed for being gay in America. Right, he was drug out to a field by three guys.
Oh my God!
And hung on a fence and left to freeze to death. And that's not that long ago. And
so what year was that?
That was probably the I feel bad I don't know this. I think it was early 90s.
And who is Matthew Shepard, for those that don't know?
Sorry, it was a little bit later than that, actually. It was sort of like in the late 1990s, like 98.
Yeah.
So literally 30 years ago.
Yeah, so it's not that long ago.
This was in Wyoming, and he was a young high school kid who was tricked into going out with some guys thinking that they had liked him, and then they beat him up and hung him on a fence in the middle of winter in Wyoming, and he froze to death.
Oh, I've heard so many stories like this.
Horror story.
And that wasn't far from where you lived.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I grew up with, right? So you're not coming out in that, right?
No.
I mean, and so the interesting part of that story for me was I completely knew the kind of people that would do that because they were there. They were with me in school. They were around in the city. You felt that that people like that existed in the world that I grew up in as a gay man. So, there was, I think that still exists on some level everywhere, right? But I think it was just a really difficult time to come out because it was not just scary to tell people you were coming out, but because there was violence around you. And you could be violently reacted. I mean, I remember getting punched in high school. Somebody called me a fag and punched me, and I went down on a car. And he was with all of his sports mates, and they were all hanging out. And I was alone in a parking lot.
And were you even openly gay?
No. Maybe I was obviously gay, but not openly gay.
Were you? Did you have a little handbag with you?
I was skipping through the parking lot.
Oh yeah, show me the picture.
I was skipping through the
Take on my phone.
So they knew you were gay, kind of deep down, and so they bullied you for it.
Acting gay, like even I wasn't openly gay in in elementary school, but like I would act, or I would, all my friends were girls. Always had girlfriends, and then I would act a bit more feminine. So even back then, when you're like 5 or 6 or 7 years old, the word gay doesn't mean much to you, but they would say, "Oh, you're a girl." Oh, Nick, you're a girl.
Yeah, I got that
Nick,
as well.
You're a girl. Yeah.
But kids will find excuses to pick at each other in high school and all that sort of stuff. Like, and especially if you don't do the traditional boy things like play sports and all that sort of stuff, and you do drama or you like the arts or swimming or tennis, you're a target.
Oh,
you know, back then in the 80s, you were a target. You were just a target.
Talking about that, I remember in school, he was my best friend at the time. I called him gay, and I got kicked out of class for it. Turns out today he's got the girlfriend and I've got the boyfriend. So I remember having to write him a apology letter on a card, and I drew in a rainbow.
Did the teacher ask
He
you
was
to
a
do that?
bully, guys.
Yeah.
Did the teacher ask you to do that?
Yeah, so the teacher said to apologize to him.
No,
He's
he
like,
wrote a rainbow as like a you're still gay.
yeah.
Like he's a bully. You should
that was
not
a mean
condone
thing.
that
No,
behavior.
but
Yeah.
the teacher made you write
I thought
him
it
an
was your ally, pride, rainbow.
No,
you were
No, he's a dick.
taking a dig.
So he was like my best friend, right? I don't know. We were just in conversation. The teacher heard me call him gay. He's not gay. He's got a girlfriend, and I never thought he was gay for one moment. I knew I was gay deep down, but
If we were at the same high school, you would have called me gay, and like you would have been that guy.
I feel like
1000%.
there's this almost, I don't know if it's called internalized homophobia, but
That's why I'm into
certainly growing up to hide and mask the fact
Sure,
that I
of
was
course.
gay, I feel like I was a little bit more macho.
Yeah.
And I did maybe throw around these words, certainly when I was a lot immature and I was younger growing up in school, just to kind of hide it and I feel like it happens today. There's a lot of straight hidden closet people that do throughout these words just to make a point of like they're not gay, but actually it just screams you're probably more likely to be
I
gay.
think the more you have a hatred for gay people.
Exactly.
It's probably something that you're hiding in deep inside. So I think the more men are comfortable with other men and gay men especially, I think that proves that they're straighter, if
Absolutely.
anything.
Yeah. That's a classic thing, isn't it? Where they get really, really aggressive on their opinions on things because
Yeah.
they're trying to hide something very
Oh,
deep
1000%,
internally.
yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas I have like the best friends that are open, they're so straight, so far on that spectrum that they openly say what they've done with guys, and it's just a laugh.
I actually want to touch on this after, but firstly, let's talk about a scenario where we had a homophobic encounter.
Okay.
So our first ever encounter that we had as a couple, so we were in my parents' hometown in Florida, where they have their place. And it's lovely there, but it's very, very conservative, like Trump loving, you know what I mean? So, yeah. So we're walking along the side of the beach, and the whole time we're like, let's not hold hands, whatever. And then at some point, like an hour into our walk, like, screw it, screw everything, let's hold hands. We hold hands. Not even 5 seconds later, a car drives by, faggots, yells, yeah.
Beep, 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 fags.
The second we got the nerve to hold hands, the second later it got called fags.
We literally hyped each other up. We're like, it took us a while to get the confidence, by the way, to be out in public and show any sort of affection. And by the way, today we rarely show affection, probably because of that moment. But it was just so funny that we were like, should we hold hands? Should we not? No, it's Florida. It's a bit more conservative here. I just don't want to risk it. And literally not even 5 seconds. Hold hands.
That's how long it took.
Someone
It
said,
never changes. It doesn't go away. You had a similar story.
I did. I was just going to say, actually, I'm surprised that aunt didn't say something like, oh, sorry, I don't have any cigarettes.
Well,
Babes, they have
he kind of
guns.
drove past, and there's guns in Florida, so
I
we
think
just said,
they
okay.
missed
You have a similar story that happened to us.
Oh, yeah, what's your
Yeah,
story?
actually, it was in London, and it wasn't not too long ago. I mean, it wasn't like I don't know. It must have been we were still living in London at the time, so it must have been 7, 8, 10 years ago, something like
No
that.
longer than that, I think, but
12, whatever
the
the number
2000s.
is.
So this was like 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah. And we were in London. I think we were sort of on the cusp of, I don't know, Chelsea, Kensington sort of area. And we were walking, we'd go sort of have brunch in the mornings and all sort of stuff. And these two guys were walking towards us. We had just parked the car. We got out of the car. These two guys are walking towards us. And they made this comment to us saying, you two fags, people like you don't belong in this area. And I was
Chelsea.
in Chelsea, and I was
That's exactly
really
what you-
shocked.
and actually, they didn't look like they belonged in Chelsea,
Yeah, you're like,
to be honest.
you don't belong in Chelsea.
So, bit of context around Chelsea and Kensington. What is that area like?
Well, it's a very affluent area. There's a lot of nice shopping, nice shops. It's a nice part of London.
So
you
the
know?
gays
It's a-
belong there.
Well,
yeah,
how did
there's
they
a
know
whole bunch of mix of
everywhere?
people.
Yeah,
Yeah, you would
no.
never expect that in Chelsea, you know?
But how did they know you were gay? Did you?
Well, I know. How?
I think,
There's more to the story.
I know.
Well, I think it's, I don't know, coming out of the car, and maybe we were dressed with nice clothes. I don't know. I mean, I'm making stuff
It
up.
is
I have
weird
no
because
idea.
we weren't even holding hands or anything.
Yeah,
we were
that's
just
what I
two
was-
guys
yeah.
walking down the street and maybe just looking so lovingly at each other all the time. But
No, that wasn't it.
but I will admit, it was scary actually. Like I thought these guys were going to get violent.
Oh, my God,
And,
okay.
Well, we did. We thought they were going to get violent, and then we thought, gosh, maybe, is it safe to be here? Should we be living in London? And we were talking.
we didn't.
Well, we sort of did. Remember, we talked to Paul about it, and we were saying, things are slightly changing, all that sort of stuff, and we were a little bit concerned and worried about that. Not that we would pick up and leave, but it was, you feel that really awful feeling in your stomach when somebody tells you really hurtful words, and as much as you try to block it out, it's like somebody kicked you in the stomach, and you go home and you play that scenario over and over in your head, and you get worried, you get scared, it's terrible. It's just terrible.
Frank,
And
I'm
no
like that
reason.
too. I think if that would have happened to us, like let's just say on our street in London, I would have felt the same way. And
We're selling the house,
I
we're
would have
moving.
yeah, because I mean, as a gay person, being told, you're the F slur and get out if you're whatever. It's like a threat. Like you feel threatened.
Yeah, you do.
And you feel like you could potentially it could get very aggressive, right? So it is very scary. It's like someone going up to you in the street going, I'm gonna punch you right now. Like no one would want to be there, right? So
Yeah.
And by the way, to these people that do say these homophobic things, we're not going anywhere. And despite when we got called a fag for holding hands, that kind of did and still has dented us. Like we rarely like to show public affection. We still do it, only in the right environments. And I feel like actually, despite generational differences, just being gay men, we do have to pick the right environments to be truly ourselves in.
Yeah.
And otherwise we mask it.
And I think that hasn't changed, unfortunately. I think the world, even as much as we look at the world and we say, oh, it's so accepting now and it's so much easier, the occurrences are still there, and homophobia is still 100% in society and in the Western world that we live in, and even worse in other countries where people are stoned to death or put in prison for being gay. There is, and it's kind of scary too how in America it feels like it's becoming a little bit more homophobic again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think we have to always be vigilant and aware that we have to fight homophobia. We have to fight it. You can't get complacent. You can't stop thinking it doesn't exist because things are getting easier in the media world and you're seeing gays, because these little instances still happen.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Right? I mean, these are all recent, and people, creating violent situations.
You just mentioned things are potentially going backwards in America and worldwide.
Yes.
I found this statistic yesterday. A shocking 515 anti-LGBTQ plus bills have been introduced in the state legislatures across the U.S. so far this year.
Yeah, it's
That's
horrible there right now.
515.
Wow.
Actually, sorry.
This is more than the entirety of 2023. We're 6 months into this year. That was it.
That's people filing complaints.
No,
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 that's-
those are laws being passed against.
Oh, laws.
515
That's
legislators.
a lot of laws.
Yeah. To the point of the podcast of have you encountered it? What's interesting is all of us talk about recent events. You know, it's not like, oh, it was so homophobic back when we were kids. It's like, no, I still walk into some situations and I go, Jesus, can we be open here? Can we hold hands here? Can we, that still exists, right? And
Yeah.
that's a scary situation that, that we have
And
to.
and I think to that point, because I think back then, I could be wrong by saying this, but I think, you just expected these things to happen, so no one ever did it, right? Like,
Yeah.
no one would kiss in public back then, or no one would hold hands.
Yeah.
But now people are so open, which is great, but what that leads to is more people seeing that in public and then commenting on it. And not just in public, I mean, on social media as well, right? So back then, there wasn't any social media, so no one could comment on stuff. But, I mean, one of our most we've ever had of hate comment has been the F slur in our comments, saying to go to hell, saying their Bible doesn't think we should be together, so that because of that we're going to hell. So that is daily comments that we get, people throwing up, looking at us. So
But hey,
we almost deal with more homophobia
Online.
just because we're online than someone might have back in the day, because there was no computers, there was no social media, all that kind of stuff.
we can hide it right behind the
Yeah.
screen, and that's
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
bad. But I would find our hate is very very immature, and it's a condensed group of people that are growing up, they're figuring themselves out. Similar to what I said, they're maybe trying to mask it, or they're hiding behind a computer. They're like, oh, it should be Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. And
So
it's,
young people are actually saying that kind of
Yeah.
stuff still today. It's not
Still.
coming from an older generation. You've got a whole new young homophobic group of people out
and
there.
I feel like
That's horrible.
our
Yeah.
age group is very accepting, and because we're a little bit more mature now, we're like 20 to 25, you wouldn't necessarily seeing that demographic of people saying this. It's usually like the younger, like maybe 10 years old to 15, that are a bit immature.
I mean, they can
Yeah.
only be hearing. Well, actually, you used to only be able to hear that kind of stuff from probably your parents and people around you. But these guys, because they're on social media, are probably hearing it from their peers.
But
Yeah.
it's also
yeah.
easier on social media just to blast a comment.
Yeah, because I was
know what
gonna
I
say
mean?
as well, like it doesn't mean that their parents are horrible people and they probably taught that. It's what they're watching online, right? So now it's not their
Exactly.
parents that teach them that; it's
Yeah,
people online,
that's a
right?
huge shift.
And there's still
Yeah.
people that online that preach certain things that
Yeah.
gays should not be existing, and it should just be Adam and Eve and all these things. So people are preaching that stuff still today online, and these kids are very easily influenced, I think, and are listening to that. Yeah.
What do you feel about this? And you mentioned that it's not the parents' fault.
Well, potentially, like in some cases, yes, I'm sure, but it's not always.
Did you hear about the story recently? It just happened last week. So a school teacher recently just got fired because she put on in class a program that taught the kids something. I can't remember, but it had one gay person in it. And because it had a gay person in it, it was nothing about being gay or anything. It was an entirely separate topic. And she put it on to educate the kids. It was found out that the parents found out, complained to the school that they don't want their kids watching anything to do with gay people. And the school fired her.
What country?
Yeah, what country?
I think the US. It was
Yeah.
US.
Oh, that makes
Okay.
sense.
And
Yeah, okay, that's adding up.
so here's a little bit more context to it. The teacher did not approve this piece of material through the school. This was extracurricular.
Yeah.
And therefore, the parents weren't happy, the school wasn't happy, and everything needs to go through the school to be approved before it can be shown to the kids. For a safety reason, that could have been any sort of content. And therefore, I kind of appreciate where they're coming from. But the root of this is the parents were unhappy that it had one gay person in it, despite there being nothing about sexual orientation or anything to do with being gay. It was a completely different topic.
You know what the issue with this, Ant, is? You know who are the losers in this? Is the kids. because the kids are not exposed to different things in their education when they should be, and they should be able to make their minds up as they grow old, be exposed to a lot of different things. And it's actually when parents behave like that, it's the kids that lose out on just a good education.
I also hate that gays continually get reduced to their sexual identity.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just hate that every time they talk about gays, people that are homophobic, it's just how we have sex.
Yeah.
Like, there's so much more to the lives of who we are and the things that we bring to the world and that we do. And this pervasiveness is minimizing as well.
I mean, to back on that point, I think when parents get so heated up about showing anything LGBTQ in schools, they should be just as heated up with showing straight couples, because if they're really concerned about sexual, then there should be no couples at all. It's not about gay or straight, you know what I mean? And I think it's just.
What are your opinions then? Because that story wasn't anything to do with being gay. It could have been, I can't remember exactly what it was, but maybe it was on finance or bloody geography or something. The point of that story was it was nothing to do with that person's sexual orientation, and therefore it's blown out of context. Now, what are your opinions on kids learning about sexual orientation, LGBTQ things, or even recently drag queens being in schools? And I know that was a huge topic.
Yeah. Well, look, I think we're quite liberal, anyways, right? I think fundamentally, children should be introduced to all lifestyles in equal proportion. So if you're going to talk about couples, you talk about all the different kinds of couples there are. You don't have to go straight into, and these couples have sex this way, and these couples have sex that way.
Yeah.
That you don't need to introduce that till they're ready to hear those kinds of things and understand them and mature enough to understand them. But from the very, very beginning of education, I think kids should be taught that it's okay for people to live different lives, and that education needs to help children understand the world that they're going to walk into. Because as much as the parents may hate it, these kids are going to walk into a world, and if they're not prepared to look around them and appreciate the differences in people, you do risk a child becoming homophobic or racist or a bigot. And I think that's the way we build a better society, is by teaching children about diversity. But I don't think you have to rush in and tell them they're gay because they sleep together. You know what I mean? They're just a couple. These two guys are a couple. This is a straight.
Just almost even storybooks where normally there'd be a prince and a princess. Just have two princes. Yeah. And just that it's not in your face.
Thank you, Disney, for starting to challenge some of this.
What?
Yes.
That is banned in a lot of schools as well.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But you're talking about America, and look, I worked for about 7 years in Dallas, Texas, and there was a guy who was a vice president in the company I worked at, and I remember I created an ad one time because I was in marketing, and it was kind of referencing the Big Bang and new energy coming out. We were in tech industry, and he called me into his office, and I'm a junior kind of marketing guy at this point in my career, and he called me into his office. And he took a printout of this ad that I had done, and he goes, "What is this?" And I said, "Oh yeah, it's one of the concepts we're pitching. It's about Big Bang. It's a new product we're bringing out." And he looked at me and he rips up the piece of paper and he threw it in my face and he goes, "There was never a Big Bang. Jesus created the earth."
Gosh.
And literally, this is work, right? And I'm thinking, man, if this man knew I was gay, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. And so I went and told my boss at the time, John, I won't say his last name, but John was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And he went and talked to the CEO. In this particular situation, it was very complicated because the guy who was vice president that threw it in my face is the son-in-law of the CEO. Oh. But John stood up for me, and I've had so many people in work stand up for me and make it okay to be gay, that I want to shout out to them, right? I mean, I've had bosses that have just been absolutely brilliant, and I know not everybody does, and I picked my bosses for the reason I knew that they would keep me safe. But, I've had bosses throughout my career that have made it okay for me to be a homosexual in the office and not have to defend or justify it.
Yeah, I found my experience was slightly different because I found, and maybe it's the sector that we worked in and all sort of stuff, but I found the corporate sector in North America is very male, high testosterone dominated.
Yeah.
And I remember when I finished uni and going through my exams, and then I started working in these big financial firms and all sort of stuff. It was just horrible. It was just horrible. And there was always a sort of the boys club and all that sort of stuff. And then you'd have to do these corporate events and, go play golf and all that sort of stuff, which I wasn't good at, but that's fine. You do it because, clients want you to do it and all that sort of stuff. But then, you'd go in the locker room to change and all that sort of stuff. And the conversations in those locker rooms was terrible. It was really scary. They would talk about people. Generally people were okay, but there was a relatively big group of men that would just
Homophobic?
Very homophobic, use inappropriate language.
Sexist?
Call people fags and, this fag, that fag, and all that sort of stuff and give their opinion. And it was just amongst them in locker rooms. And to listen to that as you're working for the organization, helping them be successful, you feel completely isolated and alone and scared. It is petrifying. It's absolutely petrifying.
Did they know you were gay when you were listening in?
No.
So is that why you felt like maybe you couldn't come out at work?
They would. Oh, that was definitely one of the reasons. Yeah. And I can tell you, if they knew I was gay, they would never have said any of those words in front of my face.
They would have said it behind your back.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which is great.
That's great.
Sorry, finish your sentence,
That's
dude.
right. Guys, don't stitch me up here, okay? I'm just saying, like, even in friendship groups, right? We need to be pulling each other up, especially if you're friends with them, and not letting this happen even behind closed doors, because that's the deep root of it, right? When there's no cameras on.
And you're absolutely right, but you have to remember during this time of our lives, there were no protection for gay people. The laws didn't exist for discrimination against gay people.
You backing them up, Dan?
A company could fire you instantly without ever having to justify it if they thought you were gay. And so we weren't protected. Yeah. So even if you came out and tried to defend somebody, or you know what I mean, you could get fired.
So that's crazy.
So I've worked till recently in the finance sector, and I can tell you, it's very different today. Kids are very open in the office. Nobody bats an eye and all that sort of stuff. It's absolutely different. Back in the 80s, it was very rare that you heard of anybody gay working in the office, and it's just not a topic that you talk about it.
Wow.
And you this constant harassment of negative words about our sort of community was actually petrifying. And just a last point on that. This was my experience. I did find working in North America very difficult because of that. I found working in corporate actually quite difficult. A lot of my bosses were good and all sorts of stuff. But I found it stressful because I always knew I was different, and I always knew I can't fit in and I can't be myself. And for whatever reason, coming to this country, and I don't know if because I was a foreigner or whatever, the British people seemed to be less fussed. It wasn't a concern for them. It was like, it wasn't a thing. I would never hear that language. Even from senior partners in the firm, you wouldn't kind of hear that language. And it was much easier for me to come out here in this country. It wasn't a thing. Versus North Americans, I think, their approach to that subject is actually quite different, and it's really petrifying in North America. Versus here, I think in the Brits are a little bit more.
Well, I mean, even the stories that you hear, like as a school child, like if I was in school, right, and I was in high school, sorry, and the guys there, if you barely like touch their arm like that, oh, you're a faggot, you're gay because you touched me. I went to the UK. I find out the shit they're doing here. I can tell some of these stories.
It's fun and games. Trust me.
There's a game. Sorry, this is like I'm not bashing on the Brits here. Straight. So again, in America, you barely touch a guy, you're gay. You get called a faggot. Here, your straight men have this game that they play, and when I found this out, I was
Soggy
like, "What
biscuit?
the hell?" So also
that's another game. Right?
There's a game. Okay, so there's three straight men, right? The guy in the middle is the referee. He jacks both the guys off. The first one to get hard is gay. That's a straight game.
Where's this happening? Where's this happening?
I mean, yeah. So what's the next game?
You know what we did?
Or say the Soggy Biscuit one. Like what's
so
that one?
Me and my mates also played the same game.
You're out
but
of your
it
mates
wasn't
now.
the first one that gets hard.
Those straight men do this. Yeah. I'm like, what the hell?
So me and my mates played the same game. Instead of it being first one to get hard is gay, it's first one to finish is gay.
Why was it not more in the UK?
Yeah, I know. I'm saying, yeah, that's very different than America.
Yeah.
Very.
You would never ever see that in America.
Touch a guy, you're gay.
Exactly.
We take it up
Crazy.
another level as well.
Okay, I don't want to know that, do we?
So, guys,
Yes.
Yes.
You step out for a sec.
so
That's the three of us talk.
Dan, you can leave the room.
No, I'm gonna listen.
Frank.
I'm staying.
Frank's ears are like, yeah.
So soggy biscuit is essentially where you have a group of guys and you finish on a biscuit, and the last one to finish has to eat it.
No,
Shut
So the
up.
least gay
You don't-
one probably.
you don't really do that.
Least gay one.
Yeah.
needs to eat it.
So basically, imagine
then
you
he
have
turns
5
gay?
guys around one
I
biscuit.
guess. That's how gays are made.
That's going to become a very soggy biscuit. So it's kind of punishment for the guy that takes the longest, probably is the least gay, and he's going to have to eat it.
I'm gonna go back on my words.
God.
The guys here are too comfortable.
But you know,
Where's the in between? Of like,
25, even for us 25 years ago, it wasn't uncommon when you go to a pub and, you know, straight guys get drunk and all that sort of stuff. And they put dresses and they have a laugh kind of wearing drag. And it was okay. It was like, it was, you know.
There is still homophobia in this
There
country.
is, but
there is an acceptance of men having fun with their sexuality.
Yeah,
I think is the
exactly.
difference. I think they tolerate men as kind of a man's thing. Oh yeah, we're just having fun with our sexuality versus being actually gay in a relationship. It's my guess. That's why I think that.
I think it's beautiful.
but I also think that
beautiful.
The Brit.
I'm never eating biscuits again.
I kind of want a biscuit right now. I'm just joking, guys. Joking.
Can we have some tea?
Oh, perfect. Yeah.
Scones after, guys. Soggy scones.
I was going to say, just to add to that point, I also think that the British is an older population, more mature population. So compared to North American men, and this is my opinion, I could be wrong, but they seem to be a little bit more mature around that stuff and confident about their sexuality.
Have you been to the North?
Well, no, I know there's always exceptions, but yeah.
No, but actually, I agree with Frank. I think they are very.
Sorry, this had me. You just went straight to the tea. You were thinking about those biscuits.
Busted.
That's right.
Now we know what you're thinking.
Fantasizing. No, I do agree with Frank. I think the men here are very comfortable, which I was shocked by as
I
a
think that's
North
it.
American.
Yeah.
They're confident when it comes to sexuality.
Yeah.
So, guys, one piece of advice, based on us all going through homophobic attacks or in some sort of way, what's one piece of advice on maybe the younger generation or those that are yet to experience it or have experienced it? How do they deal with homophobia?
I would say it is scary. It is really, really scary. So just be prepared for that. And I think you need an outlet where you need to talk to people to make sure that doesn't take over you and that you get back to a place that you feel safe. The reality of it is there's always going to be some level of that. Is how you manage it when that actually happens. And it's good when you talk to people that you're close to sort of work through that. And I wouldn't let that take over your mind too much, because that could be a spiraling downhill thing, which is not healthy.
Very well said.
Dan?
I would say I would take it one level higher and say it does exist, and so please, every opportunity you get in a safe environment, call it out. We need to call it out and not be afraid of it. We need to stop walking away from it. We walked away from that a moment and said nothing to that guy, right? We need to stop walking away from it. Don't put yourself in a violent situation. Stay safe. But we need to start calling it out. We need to change the laws. We need to continue to change the laws to make it more progressive for gay people to be in those things. And thank God this country has done a lot of progressive laws. But I would say, let's keep talking about it and confronting it together as a society, and not, hide behind it.
I'm going to back off of Dan's point. I think whether you're gay or you're straight or whatever, if you see it happening in public, help that person out.
Yes.
Stand up for them. See if they're doing okay after that, whatever it is. Even just being called a fag, that could have hurt them really a lot. So I think having if you witness it, just go see if they're okay, and try to help them out.
That's very good, Nick.
I think in this episode we've discovered that actually it might be the other person that's trying to hide themselves, mask it, like your guys in the locker room. They may have just been saying those words because actually they're in a vulnerable situation. They're in a locker room, men getting naked. They need to macho up. And the one way to do that is maybe throw a few F slurs and be a bit homophobic just to show their dominance. So I think overall understand that it's not a you problem, and completely you being yourself and being gay or whatever you are is completely valid, and it's fine, and it's actually the other person, and that goes across all forms of hate and phobias.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, just feel bad for them almost. Just feel bad for your haters because they're probably struggling a lot with their sexuality.
They might be
That
struggling
doesn't
more than
excuse it,
you.
though.
No, but yeah, I know. But they're gay themselves. Let's just admit it.
Let's call it out. Yeah.
All right, guys, that's it for the episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that.
If you did enjoy today, wherever you are streaming today's episode, if you could rate us a 5-star, that would help us out
Help the
so
gays.
much.
Help the gays out.
And guys, like this episode if you're on YouTube, or if you can, even on Spotify or whatnot. But honestly, if you can do it for us, well, we're just going to keep producing more
It's the end of Pride
episodes.
Month now, so help the gays out. All right, that's it, guys. We'll see you guys in the next episode.
Bye.
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 Bye.